The cake sat in the middle of the conference table, blazing with enough candles to trigger the fire alarm. Through the dancing flames, I could make out the message scrawled in electric blue icing. Bye-bye, burden! To Phoebe finally getting shipped off where she can't drag us down anymore. Tate clinked his plastic champagne flute against Nina's, sloshing discount bubbly onto the table. 3 years of carrying your dead weight is officially over. The entire marketing team erupted in laughter as I stood frozen in the doorway. Someone had taped printouts of anchor symbols to my now empty desk chair. Get it? Chortled Drew, pointing at the decorations. Because you've been sinking this team since day one. Nina tossed back her drink and refilled it immediately. Remember when she suggested we focus on customer retention instead of new acquisitions? Like, hello? Basic economics much? She mimicked my voice with a simpering whine that sounded nothing like me. Or when she tried implementing that project management system. Leah rolled her eyes. 2 weeks of her color-coded spreadsheets before we dumped the whole thing. Tate raised his voice over the snickering. Let's not forget her quarterly presentations. Guys, I've literally taken naps during them and still didn't miss anything important. My knuckles whitened around the cardboard box containing my desk plants and spare sweater. I'd known they resented me, but witnessing their unfiltered disdain burned differently. The mask had completely dropped now that they believed I was being banished to the Rochester office, a transfer they'd interpreted as a demotion and effective exile. Toast, called Petra, my supervisor, standing dramatically on a chair. To whatever poor team has to deal with Phoebe next, may they have endless patience and very low expectations. To freedom, someone shouted. I stepped into the room, their faces freezing momentarily before the grins returned. Wider, crueler. Oh, come on, Phoebe, Petra laughed, seeing my expression. It's just office humor. Can't you take a joke? This is exactly why you never fit in here. Drew thrust a slice of cake at me, frosting smearing across the paper plate. At least eat some cake before you disappear forever. We spent almost $30 on it. I accepted the plate, studying the faces around me. I accepted the plate, studying the faces of people who'd spent 3 years stepping on my ideas, speaking over me in meetings, taking credit for my work, and now celebrating that they'd never have to see me again. Thanks for the send-off, I said quietly. Petra smirked. Any parting words of wisdom before you go? I looked around the room one last time, memorizing each face, each expression. Then I set down my untouched cake. Just one thing, I said, my voice steady. I'll see you all on Monday. Confusion rippled through the room as I walked out, leaving my goodbye cake untouched. None of them understood what I meant. None of them knew that my transfer wasn't to Rochester. None of them had any idea that as of 9 a.m. Monday morning, I would be stepping into my new corner office at headquarters as Vice President of Marketing Operations, directly overseeing their entire division. The elevator doors closed on their puzzled faces, and for the first time in 3 years, I allowed myself a genuine smile. If you're enjoying this workplace revenge story so far, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories that'll have you on the edge of your seat. Comment below if you've ever had colleagues underestimate you. I read every comment. My name is Phoebe Marsh. I'm 34, methodical to a fault, and the kind of person who color codes her sock drawer. I've always been the quiet one in the room, the observer, the note-taker, the one who speaks last and least. Not because I have nothing to say, but because I prefer to understand all angles before offering an opinion. 3 years ago, I joined the marketing team at Westridge, with a reputation for turning struggling departments around. My previous company had given me glowing recommendations after I'd streamlined their operations and doubled their conversion rates in 18 months. I arrived at Westridge expecting to do the same, analyze, optimize, transform. What I hadn't counted on was the culture shock. From day one, the Westridge marketing department operated like a high school popularity contest. Meetings were shouting matches where the loudest voice won. Strategy was determined by whoever had the most compelling lunch date with senior management. Results mattered less than who claimed credit for them. I tried adapting at first. I spoke up more in meetings, only to have Tate or Nina talk over me. I suggested process improvements, which Petra would dismiss publicly, then quietly implement weeks later as her own ideas. I stayed late analyzing campaign data while the others networked at happy hours that somehow I never got invited to. For 3 years, I was invisible when it benefited them and a scapegoat when things went wrong. The Middletown campaign tanked because Phoebe didn't provide adequate research. Petra had announced to the division head, despite the fact that my research report, which no one had bothered to read, had specifically warned against the approach they chose. The isolation was deliberate and methodical. When team lunches were planned, my calendar mysteriously received the invites after they'd already occurred. Project wins were celebrated without me. Project failures were laid at my feet during performance reviews. "You're just not a culture fit," Petra would say during my evaluations. "You need to be more of a team player." What she meant was, you need to play by our rules, laugh at our jokes, and never, ever outshine us. I almost quit a dozen times. Each morning, I'd sit in my car in the parking garage, rehearsing resignation speeches, but something stubborn in me refused to give them the satisfaction. Instead, I did what I do best. I observed, documented, and planned. While they were busy undermining me, I was quietly mapping the entire operation. I tracked which campaigns succeeded and why. I noted which clients were at risk due to neglect. I built shadow systems that modeled what the department could achieve if run efficiently. And I kept records of everything. Every stolen idea, every misattribution of blame, every manufactured failure. 6 months ago, something unexpected happened. The CEO of Westridge, Emmett Carlisle, made an unannounced visit to our floor. While Petra and her inner circle scrambled to prepare a presentation, I found myself alone in the elevator with him. "Rough morning?" he asked, nodding at the coffee stain on my sleeve, courtesy of Drew accidentally bumping into me earlier. I looked at Emmett's kind eyes and made a split-second decision. "Actually, rough 3 years," I replied. The elevator ride was only 40 seconds, but I used every moment. I didn't complain about my treatment. Instead, I outlined 3 specific problems with our marketing approach and proposed solutions for each. "Interesting," was all he said when the doors opened. "Very interesting." 2 weeks later, I received an email requesting my presence at headquarters for a meeting with the executive team. I told no one. When asked, I said I had a dentist appointment. During that meeting, I presented my complete analysis of the department's shortcomings and my vision for restructuring. I didn't mention the social dynamics or my personal treatment. I kept it strictly professional, data-driven, and solution-focused. When they offered me the vice president position, I had one request: that my transfer be announced to my team as a lateral move to the Rochester office. I wanted a clean break before returning as their superior. "Unusual approach," noted the HR director. "I have my reasons," I replied. And so the fiction was created. Petra and the team were told I was being transferred to Rochester, a struggling satellite office where problem employees were often sent before being phased out entirely. They assumed I was being put out to pasture. They never bothered to verify this information. They were too busy celebrating my departure. Which brings us back to that goodbye party. As I drove home from that mockery of a celebration, I didn't feel anger. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity. For 3 years, they had shown me exactly who they were when they thought I didn't matter. On Monday, they would discover just how much I had been paying attention. The weekend passed in a blur of preparation. I reviewed personnel files, performance metrics, and project histories. I drafted a 90-day restructuring plan. I selected a charcoal gray suit for Monday that I'd never worn to the office before. By Sunday night, everything was ready. I slept soundly for the first time in years. Monday morning arrived with a gentle chime from my alarm. I dressed carefully, applied minimal makeup, and pulled my hair back in a simple, elegant twist. The woman in the mirror looked different, confident, composed, powerful. I arrived at headquarters at 7:30 a.m. My new office overlooked the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows and furniture that hadn't been selected from a discount office supply catalog. My name was already on the door: Phoebe Marsh, Vice President of Marketing Operations. At my request, IT had scheduled a video conference with my former team for 9 a.m. Officially, it was to introduce them to their new VP. In reality, it was to watch their faces when they realized what had happened. As the clock ticked toward 9, my phone buzzed with a text from Nina. "Hope Rochester's treating you well. Petra's having us meet some new hotshot VP this morning. Probably another middle-aged man with a golf handicap. Wish you were here to suffer through it with us. JK." I set my phone face down on the desk and opened my laptop. At precisely 9 a.m., I initiated the video call. One by one, their faces appeared on screen. I could see them gathered in the same conference room where they'd celebrated my departure 3 days earlier. The bye-bye birthday cake was gone, but someone had forgotten to take down one of the anchor decorations. It swung gently behind Petra's head, like a pendulum. "Good morning, everyone," I said, my voice clear and steady. "Thank you for joining this call." I watched confusion bloom across their faces as they recognized me. Petra blinked rapidly. Drew's mouth fell open. Nina gripped her coffee mug so tightly I thought it might shatter. "There seems to be some confusion," Petra said, forcing a laugh. "Phoebe, aren't you supposed to be in Rochester? This call is scheduled with our new VP of Marketing Operations." "That's correct," I replied. "This call is with your new VP of Marketing Operations. That would be me." The silence that followed was so complete, I could hear the wall clock ticking in their conference room through the video feed. "This is a joke," Tate finally said, looking around for confirmation. "Right? This is some kind of weird joke." "No joke," I said. "As of this morning, I am the Vice President of Marketing Operations, overseeing all regional marketing teams, including yours." Petra's face had drained of all color. But you were transferred. We were told." "You were told what you expected to hear?" I interrupted smoothly. "And none of you bothered to verify it, which, coincidentally, is just one example of the lack of due diligence I'll be addressing in my restructuring plan." Drew stood up abruptly. "This is ridiculous. I'm calling Emmett." "Please do," I said. "He's expecting your call. In fact, he specifically asked me how I thought you'd all react to this news." Nina set down her mug, coffee sloshing over the rim. "Phoebe, about Friday, the party, we were just—" "Let's keep this professional," I cut in. "We have a lot to cover this morning, and I'm not interested in discussing the party. That's in the past. I'm much more interested in the future." I shared my screen, displaying a detailed organizational chart. You'll notice some changes effective immediately. Reporting structures have been modified based on performance metrics and project outcomes from the past 2 years. The chart showed a dramatic reshuffling. Petra no longer headed the team. Tate and Nina had been moved to separate projects under new supervisors. Drew had been reassigned entirely. "This can't be legal," Petra sputtered. "You can't just come in and—" "I can and I have," I said. "These changes have been approved at the highest level. But don't worry, Petra. No one is being fired today." I paused, allowing that to sink in before adding, "Though, after reviewing the performance reports, perhaps some of you might wish you were." I clicked to the next slide. "Now, let's discuss the first phase of our departmental transformation. We'll start with a comprehensive audit of all current projects, client communications, and resource allocations. I expect complete transparency and cooperation from everyone." The faces on my screen showed various stages of shock, anger, and fear. These people had tormented me for 3 years, believing I would never be in a position to affect their careers. They had underestimated me at every turn, dismissed my abilities, and celebrated my apparent downfall. Now they were beginning to understand their mistake. "One more thing," I said, my finger hovering over the button to end the call. "I'll be working primarily from headquarters, but I'll be visiting the regional office every Wednesday. Our first in-person meeting will be this week. I suggest you all come prepared to discuss your individual contributions to the department over the past year, with specific examples, of course." I smiled, not warmly, not coldly, just professionally. "Any questions before we wrap up this initial meeting?" No one spoke. 20 pairs of eyes stared back at me in stunned silence. "Excellent," I said. "Then I'll see you all on Wednesday. Have a productive day." I ended the call and sat back in my chair, heart pounding but outwardly calm. Phase 1 was complete. They knew who I was now. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly imagine, was what I had planned for them next. Because the restructuring chart I'd shown them, that was just the beginning. My office phone rang exactly 16 minutes after the video call ended. Petra's name flashed on the display. I let it ring through to voicemail. 9 minutes later, she called again. Then Nina. Then Tate. By noon, I had 17 missed calls and 23 unread emails from my former team members. I responded to none of them. Instead, I spent the day meeting with other department heads, reviewing quarterly projections, and finalizing my strategy for Wednesday's in-person visit. Every few hours, I checked the activity logs for our project management system. The regional office was suddenly buzzing with productivity. Files that hadn't been updated in months were being modified. Reports were being completed. Long-abandoned client communications were being renewed. Amazing what the right motivation could accomplish. At 5:17 p.m., my personal cell phone rang, a number I'd never given to anyone at work. It was Petra. "How did you get this number?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I have my ways, she said, attempting to sound casual. Listen, Phoebe, I think we got off on the wrong foot this morning. I said nothing, letting the silence stretch uncomfortably. The party, it wasn't what it looked like, she continued, her words tumbling out faster. It was just silly office humor. We do that with everyone. Remember when Zach from accounting transferred? We gave him a calculator that would only display the number 8. It's tradition. Was Zach's calculator decorated with tombstones too? I asked quietly. That was Drew's idea, not mine. She backpedaled. Look, I know things weren't always perfect between us, but I've always respected your analytical approach. I closed my eyes, remembering all the times she'd called my methods obsessive and unnecessarily detailed in front of clients. Is there something specific you need, Petra? I have dinner plans. Actually, yes. Her tone brightened with false warmth. I was hoping we could meet before Wednesday, just you and me, to align on vision and strategy. I have some fantastic ideas for restructuring that I think would complement your plans perfectly. I'm sure you do, I replied, but my schedule is fully booked until Wednesday. I'll see you at the office at 9 sharp. But, good night, Petra. I ended the call and turned back to my computer. On the screen was the personnel file I'd been reviewing, Petra's performance history, including the evaluations she'd written about herself, versus the feedback submitted by her team members. The discrepancies were illuminating. For 3 years, Petra had positioned herself as the team's driving creative force while dismissing my contributions as merely technical. What she never knew was that I'd been documenting everything, each stolen idea, each misattributed success, each manufactured failure assigned to me. I hadn't done it with revenge in mind. Documentation was simply my nature, the same unnecessarily detailed approach she'd mocked. Now those details would prove invaluable. Tuesday passed in a flurry of preparation. I met with HR to discuss the regional offices concerning turnover rate. I reviewed client feedback that had mysteriously never made it into official reports. I authorized a comprehensive audit of all marketing campaigns from the past 2 years, with special attention to resource allocation and attribution of outcomes. By Tuesday evening, my inbox contained panicked messages from nearly everyone on the team. Most followed a similar pattern: claims they had always valued me, explanations for past behaviors, and thinly veiled attempts to position themselves as my allies. Only Drew remained silent, though his project folders showed frantic activity as he attempted to clean up months of neglected work. Wednesday morning arrived with a crystal-clear sky and unusual warmth for early spring. I chose my outfit carefully, a tailored navy dress that I'd purchased specifically for this day. Professional yet confident, I drove to the regional office with windows down, letting the breeze clear my mind. The security guard did a double take when I badged in. Ms. Marsh? Thought you'd transferred to Rochester. Change of plans, I replied with a smile. The elevator ride to the 4th floor gave me a moment to center myself. When the doors opened, I stepped into a transformed environment. Gone was the usual morning chatter. Instead, 20 people sat rigidly at their desks, eyes darting nervously toward the elevator. I walked unhurriedly past Tate, who suddenly became intensely focused on his computer screen. Nina stood abruptly, coffee in hand, mouth open to speak, but I continued past her without slowing. My former desk had been cleared of the anchor decorations and now displayed a pathetically obvious "Welcome back" sign. I continued to the conference room, where I found Petra already waiting, surrounded by neatly arranged presentation materials and a tray of pastries that hadn't been present at any previous meeting. Phoebe, Ms. Marsh, or do you prefer VP Marsh? She laughed nervously. I took the liberty of preparing some visuals for our discussion today. And there's coffee coming, the good kind from that shop you mentioned once. I set my laptop down at the head of the table, her usual seat. Everyone will be here in 5 minutes. Until then, I'd like to review something with you privately. Her smile faltered. Of course, anything. I opened a folder and slid a document across the table. This is an analysis of the Brightline campaign from last year. Her eyes darted over the page, confusion evident. Right, the Brightline campaign, one of our successes. According to your report to upper management, yes, you claimed an 18% increase in conversion and attributed the strategy to what you called your innovative segmentation approach. That's right, she nodded vigorously. My approach really revolutionized how we— This, I interrupted, sliding another document toward her, is my original proposal for that campaign. submitted 3 weeks before yours. You'll notice the segmentation strategy is identical, down to the percentage allocations. Her face paled. There must be some mistake. Great minds just think alike, you know. Perhaps, but these, I continued, placing a third document before her, are the actual results of the campaign, not an 18% increase. A 4% increase, which barely covered the additional ad spend you authorized without approval. The conference room door opened as team members began filing in. Petra hurriedly gathered the papers, shoved them into a folder, and plastered on a bright smile for the arrivals. "Welcome, everyone," she announced with forced cheer. "Exciting day ahead with our new VP." I watched as they arranged themselves around the table. Nina positioned herself directly to my right, always the strategist. Tate chose a seat halfway down, attempting to blend in. Drew slunk in last, taking a chair in the corner, as far from me as possible. "Thank you all for coming," I began once everyone was seated. "Today marks the beginning of significant changes for this department." For the next hour, I outlined my restructuring plan in meticulous detail. Projects were reassigned based on actual skill sets rather than self-promotion. Reporting structures were flattened to increase transparency. New metrics for success were established that valued substance over showmanship. Additionally, I said, nearing the end of my presentation, I've identified concerning patterns in how credit has been assigned for successful initiatives, as well as how blame has been distributed for failures. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Moving forward, all project contributions will be tracked through our new management system. Each team member will submit weekly progress reports directly to me. Attribution will be verifiable and transparent. Nina's hand shot up. "Isn't that a bit excessive? It could hamper our creative flow." "Interesting perspective," I replied, especially coming from someone who claimed credit for the Westlake rebranding that was primarily developed by Zoe. Zoe, a quiet designer who'd been with the company less than a year, looked up in surprise from her notebook. "That's not, I mean, Zoe contributed, but the concept was mine," Nina stammered. "The timestamp on the initial concept file says otherwise," I noted, as do the revision histories, showing your only contributions came after the client had already approved Zoe's design. Nina sank back in her chair, face burning. "Any other concerns about the new tracking system?" I asked the silent room. No hands raised. "Excellent. Now, let's discuss individual roles moving forward." One by one, I outlined new responsibilities. Some were promotions, mostly for the quieter team members, whose work had gone unrecognized. Others were lateral moves that stripped away artificial titles while maintaining core duties. And some, specifically Petra, Nina, Tate, and Drew, found themselves with dramatically reduced authority. Petra will transition from team director to client relations specialist, focusing exclusively on the accounts she hasn't lost in the past year. Petra's face contorted. You can't. I've been director for 5 years. And in that time, client retention has dropped 22%, I replied evenly. Your strengths clearly lie elsewhere. I'll fight this, she hissed, dropping all pretense of friendship. Emmett and I go way back. Feel free to discuss it with him, I said. He personally approved these changes after reviewing the same data I did. The restructuring continued. Nina was moved from creative lead to content writer. Tate lost his project management role entirely, reassigned to analytics, the department he'd repeatedly mocked as the number crunchers. Drew, who'd been responsible for the tombstone decorations, found himself reporting directly to Zoe, whose ideas he'd been stealing for months. By meeting's end, the power dynamics had been completely inverted. Those who'd spent years claiming credit for others' work now found themselves accountable to the very people they'd exploited. These changes take effect immediately, I concluded. New access permissions have already been updated in our systems. You'll find detailed descriptions of your revised roles in your email. I closed my laptop. One final note. I understand change can be difficult. Anyone who feels they cannot adapt to this new structure is welcome to tender their resignation. I'll personally ensure you receive excellent references, accurately reflecting your contributions here. The threat beneath the offer was clear: stay and work under new rules, or leave with a truthful reference that might make finding equivalent positions challenging. That's all for now. Individual meetings will begin this afternoon. Zoe, you're first at 1 p.m. As everyone filed out in stunned silence, Petra lingered behind. You won't get away with this, she said when we were alone, her voice low and dangerous. You think you've won? This isn't over. I met her gaze steadily. You're right about one thing, Petra. This isn't over. In fact, it's just beginning. The air between us crackled with tension as I gathered my materials. 3 years of dismissal, theft, and sabotage had culminated in this moment. But unlike the revenge fantasies I'd occasionally indulged in during my darkest days, I felt no triumphant surge of joy, no vindictive satisfaction. Instead, I felt something much more powerful, purpose. Because this wasn't about revenge, it was about correction, about rebuilding a broken system, about creating the department that should have existed all along, one where work was valued over politics, where substance mattered more than style, where genuine talent could thrive. And if those who'd tormented me suffered in the process, that was simply an inevitable consequence of justice being served. Your one-on-one is scheduled for 4 p.m., I informed Petra as I walked toward the door. Don't be late. I value punctuality. As I stepped into the hallway, 20 pairs of eyes darted away, pretending they hadn't been watching the conference room door. The next phase of my plan was about to begin, and not one of them could imagine what was coming. The afternoon unfolded like a series of carefully orchestrated chess moves. Each one-on-one meeting revealed another layer of my strategy. I started with Zoe and the other quiet performers, the ones who'd been overlooked and undervalued for years. Their meetings were brief, positive, focused on opportunities rather than grievances. I watched them leave my temporary office walking taller, energized by finally being seen. As the day progressed, the mood in the department shifted. Whispered conversations in break rooms fell silent when I passed. Tate paced outside my door during his scheduled slot, rehearsing excuses I could hear through the thin walls. Come in, I called precisely at his appointed time. He entered with an expression I'd never seen on his face before. Fear. Sit down, Tate. I gestured to the chair across from me. Let's discuss your new role in analytics. Look, Phoebe, VP Marsh, there's been a huge misunderstanding, he began, words tumbling out. All those times I interrupted you in meetings, I was just excited about your ideas, and that project tracker you developed that I said wouldn't work, I was trying to challenge you to make it even better. I let him ramble for 90 seconds before raising my hand to stop him. I'm not interested in rewriting history, Tate. I'm interested in results. I turned my monitor so he could see the screen. This is your new performance dashboard. Every task, every deadline, every deliverable will be tracked here, visible to the entire team. His eyes widened. But you can't expect. No one can perform under that kind of scrutiny. Interesting, I replied. You've repeatedly claimed to handle triple the workload of anyone else on the team. This system simply verifies those claims with data. That's different. Creative work can't be measured like, you're not in creative anymore, I reminded him. You're in analytics now, where everything is measured. His face flushed dark red. This is personal. You're punishing me because of your performance metrics. I finished for him, sliding a folder across the desk. 3 major projects late in the past 6 months. Client complaints about misrepresented data, consistently taking credit for work primarily completed by others. That's not fair. Everyone does that here. It's how the game is played. The game has new rules now, I said simply. You're welcome to play by them or find another table. By late afternoon, the pattern was clear. Each person who had tormented me discovered that their new role precisely matched their documented weaknesses. Nina, who had belittled my writing, now had to produce content that passed through 3 approval layers. Drew, who had called my designs basic, now reported to Zoe, whose work he had routinely stolen. At 3:58 p.m., I prepared for my final meeting of the day, Petra. She arrived 2 minutes early, composed and calculating. The initial shock had worn off, replaced by something more dangerous, adaptation. Petra had survived in corporate environments for years by shapeshifting to whatever each situation required. I've been reflecting on your feedback, she began smoothly, settling into the chair. You're absolutely right about the need for more accountability. I'm excited to focus on client relations and repair any damaged partnerships. Her pivot to supportive colleague was impressive but transparent. I'm glad to hear that, I replied, maintaining a neutral expression, especially since client retention will be your only performance metric moving forward. Her smile faltered slightly. Only metric? Surely my experience in strategy development will not be relevant to your new position, I finished. You'll be handling exclusively the Hudson account. The color drained from her face. Hudson? But they've been threatening to leave for months. They're impossible to please. Yes, they are, I agreed, particularly since you blamed their last campaign's failure on execution errors by the technical team rather than your flawed strategy. I spoke with their CMO yesterday, I continued. Explained the restructuring. Promised them you would personally oversee every aspect of their account moving forward. They've agreed to give us one last chance, with you as their dedicated point of contact. Petra's carefully constructed facade cracked. That's setting me up to fail. Hudson is a lost cause. Then consider it an opportunity to prove your client relation skills, I said, opening her file. Now, there's another matter we need to discuss. The Brightline campaign data discrepancy. Look, I may have rounded up some numbers. You inflated results by 14% and took credit for a strategy you didn't develop, I corrected, which might explain why the audit team will be here tomorrow morning. Her eyes widened. Audit team? From headquarters. They'll be reviewing all campaign reports from the past 3 years, comparing claimed results against actual performance data. That's departmental standard procedure, she stammered. Everyone adjusts numbers to tell the right story. Not anymore, I said. The audit was Emmett's idea, actually, after I showed him the discrepancies in the Brightline numbers. Petra's breathing quickened. This is a witch hunt. No, it's accountability, I corrected. The audit team doesn't report to me. They're independent. They'll simply find what they find. And if they find issues with my reporting? I shrugged. That would be between you and the compliance committee. For the first time, real fear showed in her eyes. This wasn't just about demotions or restructuring anymore. This was about professional integrity. You've been planning this, she whispered, all along. The quiet act, the detailed notes, the perfect employee routine, it was all leading to this moment. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. No, Petra, you've been creating this moment for 3 years. I just documented it. The weight of realization settled over her. Every shortcut, every stolen idea, every manipulated number was coming back in a wave she couldn't outrun. What do you want? She asked finally. Just tell me what it will take to make this go away. Nothing is going away, I replied. The audit happens tomorrow. Your new role begins immediately. The consequences of your past actions will unfold, as they unfold. So this is your revenge, she said bitterly. This isn't revenge, I corrected her. This is restoration. For 3 years, this department has rewarded the wrong things. Self-promotion over substance, politics over performance, volume over value. I'm simply restoring balance. I closed her file. You still have choices, Petra. You can resign today. You can stay and attempt to succeed in your new role. You can face the audit and accept whatever comes. But you cannot continue as you have been. None of you can. She stood up slowly, composure shattered. You won't last. They'll see through you eventually. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But by then, the systems I'm implementing will be firmly in place. The culture will have shifted, and the way this department operates will have fundamentally changed, with or without me. As she reached the door, I added, one last thing, Petra. That goodbye party you threw? Keep the decorations. You might need them sooner than you think. The audit team arrived promptly at 9 a.m. Thursday morning. By noon, they had requested access to all campaign files from the past 3 years. By Friday afternoon, Petra, Nina, and 2 other senior team members had submitted their resignations rather than face the audit's conclusions. Tate lasted 2 weeks in analytics before quitting, unable to function in a role that required verifiable results rather than charisma. Drew held on longer but eventually transferred to another department after failing to meet Zoe's clearly documented expectations. 1 month after my goodbye party, the marketing department was nearly unrecognizable. New talent had been promoted from within. Collaborative processes had replaced competitive power plays. Client satisfaction scores had already begun to rise. On a rainy Tuesday, exactly 6 weeks after becoming VP, I found a small box on my desk at headquarters. Inside was a plastic cake topper, one of the anchor decorations from my farewell celebration. Attached was a note in Zoe's handwriting. Found this while cleaning out storage. Thought you might appreciate the reminder of how far we've come. I smiled, placing the anchor in my desk drawer. Not as a souvenir of past humiliation, but as a symbol of transformation, both the department's and my own. That afternoon, I received an email from Emmett requesting a meeting to discuss the remarkable turnaround in regional marketing performance. The audit findings had been conclusive. Years of misreported results, and misattributed credit had masked serious structural problems, problems that were now being systematically addressed. As I prepared my presentation for Emmett, I reflected on the past 6 weeks. My so-called revenge hadn't been about destroying careers or inflicting pain. It had been about creating a department where success came from genuine achievement rather than manipulation, where credit went to those who earned it, where accountability wasn't a punishment but a standard. In the end, the most satisfying revenge wasn't watching my tormentors fall. It was building something better from the ruins of what they'd created, and knowing they would recognize, too late, that I had been capable of it all along. They had thrown me a goodbye party, never imagining I was headed somewhere they would have to answer to me. They had celebrated getting rid of me, never suspecting I would be the architect of their professional futures. They had underestimated me at every turn, and in doing so, they had given me the perfect opportunity to prove exactly what I could do. Not with shouting or showmanship, not with politics or manipulation, but with quiet, methodical, undeniable results, just as I had always worked. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or pushed aside, I hope this story reminds you that sometimes the best response isn't immediate confrontation. It's patient documentation and strategic planning. Sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't what you do to others, but what you build for yourself. Drop a comment below if you've ever had a workplace experience like Phoebe's, and subscribe for more stories about justice served with perfect timing. Because remember, success is the best revenge, but success with receipts? That's simply unbeatable.